The storm had eaten the sky, tore the stars as if they were silk and stitched darkness in their place. By morning, only fragments of the gale remained. Shredded sails, broken timbers, and a trembling man clinging to the wreckage of a world he no longer recognized. His name was Elian Rochefort, once the crown's most esteemed cartographer, a man who had mapped the boundaries of reason and myth alike. But now, drifting alone in the aftermath, his ink-stained hands clutched no compass, no chart, only a name whispered in the fevered journals of madmen: Avenoria, the island that unmade time. Years before, Elian had dismissed such tales with the arrogance of a scholar. The idea of a land where time reversed itself was, to him, an insult to geometry. But curiosity, as it often does, metastasized. It began with a sailor's tale in a Marseille tavern, a sunburned man missing an eye, claiming he had landed upon a shore where children aged backwards and clocks wept mercury. Elian laughed. Then he read the logs. Then he stole them. Then he couldn't sleep. The Queen's Navy had no interest in chasing ghosts, so he chartered a vessel in secret, hiring only the desperate, debtors, grave robbers, men with names they no longer used. The journey eastward grew heavier with each mile, as if time itself were turning thick, like treacle or guilt. The sea resisted them. Winds hissed in unfamiliar tongues. Maps became nonsense. Then, as if exhaling one last warning, the sea threw them into ruin. Now, washed upon a beach of violet sand, Elian rose with the posture of a man too tired to pray. The island was wrong in every sense. The trees swayed out of rhythm with the wind, casting shadows that bent toward the sun. The birds flew backward mid-flight as if rewinding the very notion of motion. The air tasted sweet, like overripe fruit in memory, but it stung his lungs. Every breath felt like a déjà vu he had not yet earned. Elian wandered inland, guided by instinct and dread. Time, as he had always known it, did not obey here. His shadow grew longer the closer he came to the island's heart. A rusted sundial stood half buried in black moss, its gnomon bent backwards. It read noon. It always read noon. That night, he dreamt of a child with his mother's face, crying not from fear, but from remembering something yet to come. And in that moment, he realized Avenoria was not simply a place where time moved backward. It was a wound in the universe, a place where consequence preceded cause, where regret came before the act. And he had just stepped inside it. At first, Elian believed it was the fever, that tremulous haze that clings to shipwreck survivors. But the visions did not fade with consciousness. They thickened, calcified, gained weight. As he stepped deeper into Avenoria, the very fabric of reality trembled beneath his boots. The grass wilted as he approached and bloomed again behind him, as though the island was undoing his presence in real time. He wandered through a grove where the trees bore fruit and then unbored them. Apples regrew into blossoms. Blossoms retreated to buds. The wind carried laughter, high and silver. But when he turned to follow it, the echoes recoiled into silence. A raven flew overhead and its wings flapped in reverse, lifting not against gravity, but away from some invisible conclusion. It was there, in a clearing that smelled of damp porcelain and spoiled honey, that he found the first inhabitant. She sat on a throne of bones that had not yet been bones. Ivory reverted to marrow in her presence. Her hair, black as obsidian, flowed upward like an inverted waterfall. But it was her face, familiar achingly so, that rooted Elian to the soil. He saw in her the sharp cheekbones of his mother, the searching eyes of his sister, the mouth of a woman he once loved but never confessed to. She spoke not with lips, but with a voice that seemed to arrive before the sound itself. "You've come far to forget," she said, though Elian had not yet spoken. He tried to ask her name, but the question died in his throat, strangled by a deeper sensation. He had already asked her, in another time, or perhaps in a time yet to come. The woman, if woman she truly was, gestured toward the garden behind her, a labyrinth of hedges shaped like melting statues. Vines twisting around themselves in the shape of serpents eating their tails. "This is where the unbecoming happens," she said, her tone soft but soaked with finality. "Where memory decays backwards, where sin peels itself from the soul." Elian, drawn by forces older than desire, entered. Inside the garden, time no longer walked. It sank. He saw versions of himself flickering in the shadows. Younger, older, thinner, broken. He saw a boy crying over a broken compass, a youth burning a love letter, a man sketching a map with shaking hands. Each was a version of regret made flesh, unspooling backward from some singular, unstated catastrophe. And in the center of the maze, he found a mirror that did not reflect. Instead, it remembered. He leaned forward, and in its darkened face, he saw not who he was, but who he had been, and who he might become if time kept unspooling. A child again, then an infant, then a flicker in the womb. The weight of identity slipped from his shoulders like wet silk. Elian stumbled back, gasping, clawing at the air for something fixed, something that obeyed the arrow of time. But there was no forward here, only undoing. The woman reappeared behind him. Her voice, if it was her voice, whispered not into his ears but into his memory, planting words that would blossom into thoughts before he could question them. You do not come to Avenoria to escape time. You come here to be unwritten. Somewhere deep inside, Elian felt it begin. Not death. Something colder. Reversal. Elian awoke in a house he did not remember building. Its walls were made of stacked hourglasses, their sands swirling upward like smoke returning to the flame. Windows open not to landscapes, but to flickering scenes from lives he had never lived, or had yet to live, playing in loops of breathless symmetry. He did not question how he arrived there. In Avenoria, questions came after answers. And sometimes not at all. He wandered the corridors, which twisted like veins in the body of a god, and each door he opened led to another version of himself. Behind one he was ancient, stooped, covered in ink and remorse, muttering dates backwards. Behind another, he was a child sketching the stars on the floor with trembling chalk, then wiping them away tearfully. He closed each door more quickly than the last, not out of fear, but out of recognition. At the center of the house, beneath a ceiling made entirely of shattered clocks frozen mid-explosion, he met the archivist. Was not old, but she carried age like a perfume. Her eyes were cataracts of milky light, and her fingers glowed faintly, as if lit from within by the dying embers of extinguished years. She sat before a massive ledger, each page blank, until her hand passed over it, at which point entire lives emerged in reverse. Memories, undoings, thoughts fading back into silence. You are not the first, she said, without lifting her gaze. But you may be the last. Elian stepped closer, heart pounding with the rhythm of a song he hadn't heard yet. What is this place? A wound, she replied, or a mercy, or both? Avenoria is where time comes to unburden itself, where those who've done too much, or not enough, are given one final offering, to be forgotten. But why me? She finally looked at him, and in her gaze he saw his face, reflected through the years like a cracked kaleidoscope. Because you came willingly. She handed him a small box carved from black wood and humming softly. Inside is your moment, the one that brought you here. Elian opened it. Inside, no object, only a feeling. Bitter, sharp, unbearable. Regret. A single moment played in reverse. The day he betrayed a friend for royal favor, the day he forged a map that led not to gold but to graveyards. A moment he had buried beneath rationalizations and silence. Now it burned in his palm like cold fire. And he understood. In Avenoria, sins were not punished. They were undone. One memory at a time, until you ceased to be the person who committed them. But if I forget, he whispered, who will be left of me? The archivist closed the ledger. That is the price of peace. Outside, the sky wept backward. Rain rose from the soil and returned to the clouds. The island stirred as if dreaming itself anew. Elian, for the first time, wondered if he was already forgetting how to leave. The days, if they could be called that, blurred into themselves. Elian no longer marked time by the sun, which now rose from the west and descended, trembling beneath the eastern horizon, but by the disintegration of memory. Names no longer held. Words were reversed on his tongue. His reflection, glimpsed in puddles or mirrored glass, no longer mimicked him, but seemed to move slightly out of sync, like a memory pretending to be present. He began to dream in reverse, not memories relived, but experiences unwritten. Feelings peeled away until only a hollow outline of self remained. In the mornings, he awoke weeping, though the tears crawled back into his eyes before they could fall. One evening, he followed the sound of music, fractured notes drifting from the shore. There, by the violet sea, he saw the tower, rising from the waves, like the spire of a cathedral drowned by regret. It had not been there before, or perhaps it always had, and only now did he remember forgetting it. The tower was made not of stone, but of timepieces. Stacked clocks, melted watches, bell chimes twisted into grotesque gargoyles. As he approached, the tide pulled away from his feet, receding as if fearing to touch him. The water shimmered with inverted starlight. Inside the tower, he found no stairs, only a descent, a spiral path that led deeper into the earth. The walls ticked softly, a heartbeat not his own. Shadows moved faster than their owners. The deeper he went, the younger he felt, not in body, but in certainty. Doubts long buried reawakened. Childhood anxieties, adolescent wounds, the raw ache of first humiliation, all returned like guests long exiled. At the bottom, he found the clock. It was not a mechanism, but a living thing. Massive, pulsing, forged of gears and sinew. Its pendulum, a silver spine swaying in defiance of logic. Every swing ticked backward, echoing into the marrow of his bones. Around it stood figures, motionless, cloaked in dust. Some he recognized, the ship's captain who had vanished on the third day, the navigator who jumped without cause, his former mentor presumed dead a decade ago. Their eyes were open, but time no longer passed through them. They had become fixtures of the island, absorbed into its memory, held forever in a moment that would never resolve. Elian fell to his knees. He finally understood. Avenoria was not a place you found, it was a verdict, summoned only those already unraveling, whose guilt had made their inner clocks stutter, misfire, hesitate. He reached toward the clock, not in defiance, but in surrender. But the pendulum stopped. The island shook. Not with violence, but with hesitation, as if, for the first time in eternity, Avenoria itself doubted. And that's when he saw it. On the wall above the clock, etched in fading gold, "You may leave when you choose to remember." The inscription shimmered like breath on a mirror. "You may leave when you choose to remember." Elian stared at it, trembling, not with cold, but with a kind of grief that had no name. The clock before him, once steady in its reversal, now hung still, its gears groaning in quiet confusion. The silence that followed was the loudest sound he had ever heard. For the first time since arriving, he could feel the weight of his body again, the sting in his joints, the dust in his lungs, the quiet ache of choices long buried. The island was no longer undoing him. It was waiting. He rose, hands shaking, breath shallow. Around him, the figures, those lost to memory, began to shimmer, their outlines softening like ink in rain. They did not move, yet something in them shifted, as if his choice might echo into theirs. Remember, the island had said, but memory, he now realized, was a blade. He closed his eyes and let it all come back. The betrayal. The lie was drawn across parchment, the man he had led into the storm with promises of fortune, whose bones now slept in nameless reefs. The truth he buried beneath layers of logic and ink, the silence he had offered in return for accolades. And then, the shame. The unbearable clarity that he had been no mere cartographer of lands, but of ruin. His breath caught, and the pain came, like fire through frozen veins. But along with it came color, weight, heat. His pulse returned. He could hear the tide again, not in reverse, but forward, returning. The clock groaned, then moved, not backward, not forward. It chimed, and the figures once still as statues crumbled, not into dust, but into light, drawn upward through the spiral tower, as though time itself were exhaling them, setting them free. The gears unwound. The darkness cracked open. The door revealed itself where there had been only stone. Elian passed through it without speaking. He emerged at the same beach where he had first awoken. The sky no longer bruised, but heavy with dawn. The waves no longer retreated. They welcomed. The sun, at last, rose from the east. In the sand at his feet lay the same compass he had abandoned long ago. Its needle turned, uncertain, but moving. He picked it up. It no longer pointed to north or south, but to something older. Accountability. Behind him, the island began to fade. Not vanish, but recede, like a memory that knew its place. He turned away and walked into the surf. And as he waded toward the horizon, one final thought settled in his bones, carved into him not with pain, but with mercy. Time does not heal, it remembers. And that is enough.